right. Hi, Dr. Smith. How are we doing today?
I'm great, Josh. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. We're thrilled to have you on the podcast today. I know that KSU Salina is one of our newest partners, so thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
So I know that we're going to talk a little bit about your application process, but before we get into that, you've got quite an interesting story of getting into college admissions and the enrollment game. And I think it gets crazier every time we talk. So tell me a little bit about what brings you to college enrollment.
Yeah, if you had asked me 15 years ago if I would ever be in higher education, I would have said, "I'm sorry, what?" So, but yeah, you know what? I think every person has their own journey, and I feel like mine has really prepared me for some of the successes that we are having. But to your point, yeah, I've always been in sales, and then also owner of quick service restaurants or QSRs, and also upscale wine bar restaurants. And so, what's selling that? I'd always loved being in front of customers, but once we sold the restaurants, it was kind of like, well, what do I do now? And a good friend of mine, who was a director of admissions at another institution, said, "You should recruit culinary students." And I said, "Okay." And so he shared with me about the Art Institute of Charlotte because I was in North Carolina at the time. And I started recruiting culinary students. I started off as assistant director of admissions and absolutely fell in love with it. The mere fact of being able to help point students or prospective students in the right direction was very appealing to me. And so did very well with that. And my old director of admissions then went to DeVry University and Keller Graduate School of Management and recruited me over there. Started off as an admissions representative and 8 promotions within 8 years. Was what they call a director of admissions too, and I had multiple campuses. I had the Charlotte, North Carolina campus, and then also the Raleigh Durham campus. And then, from there, found out about this wonderful opportunity in Kansas, and I got very excited about it because it's very similar to our other institutions and hands-on learning and so forth. And so that was very exciting to me, and plus the marketing component that was attached to that. But yeah, that kind of led me to here, and I've been here at Kansas State University Salina. It's our aerospace and technology campus. I've been here for this August will be 6 years.
Wow, that's amazing. It's so funny as I was thinking about our conversation today and the successes, and we'll get into those, of course. But I was like, how much of it makes sense, as a kid who grew up in the restaurant business, right? I think I served and bartended for 15 years or so. How much that correlates actually over to enrollment, right? It just
Really does.
amazes me that how I didn't put two and two together, I think, until our conversation previously, that learning about your experiences. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense how closely related the two are. So that's fantastic. Thank you. So let's go back 6 years. What did campus look like prior to your getting there? What was the current state of enrollment?
Yeah, so the campus actually had been declining for 5 straight years before I started. And the CEO and dean at the time, definitely a visionary, and said, "Listen, we've been doing the same thing for the past 5 years, and it's not working. So we need to take a different approach." And that's where I came into play. But it's always good when you're in my type of position and you've got leadership is supportive and allows you to do what you were hired to do. And so that definitely played a part in our earlier success. But the whole campus in general, they needed a win. After 5 straight years of declining, personnel changes, environment changes, what's our identity in the overall scheme of Kansas State University, and how are we going to be different? And most people would look at that and would be a little nervous. And I was like, bring it on. I was like, it's kind of, I kind of like to say, you can kick me out of the office, but I'm gonna come back and buy the whole damn building. And and that's kind of the approach I take with just about everything. And so, yeah, here I am.
If I love that. What a game changer when leadership says, we'll support your vision,
Absolutely.
how much that changes and alleviates barriers, knowing that you might make there may be some mistakes, right? Like there's going to be some up and downs. But I love that you said that they needed to win. I think that that's such a critical piece. Even if it's teeny tiny, right? We're not going to see huge enrollment increases typically, although I think y'all did. But it's those wins that really kind of start that progression moving forward and quickly.
And don't get me wrong, I was not offered, an endless budget. It was very similar, even though it wasn't, it wasn't $0, but it wasn't, $1 million either. But it also allowed me to be able to think outside of the box. I told the dean and CEO at the time, if you're looking for someone to stay inside the box that's not going to have an entrepreneurial spirit, there's no need for me to move from North Carolina to Kansas. Because that was a big move. But again, I got in, and after about 6 months of kind of evaluating the situation, and where you talk about freeing up some resources to be able to do that, they all thought I was crazy at the time. But the traditional way, in my opinion, of recruiting students, where there's a difference, in my opinion, between high school presenters, and there's nothing wrong with that, to admissions professionals. And I can elaborate more on what I mean between the two of them. But the old style of standing in a lunchroom and, my representatives holds up a purple pencil and it's better than your green pencil or your red pencil, just was not doing it. And so this particular situation, I brought all of my team out from the road, out from visiting schools, and brought them in-house to teach them the consultative approach.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we did replace that with digital marketing and some other omni-channel approaches to make sure that we got the inquiries that we needed to be successful.
Sure.
But when that happened, they're like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." And so because my experience in the past has shown that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes institutions concentrate so much on the top of the funnel, right? But then once they get the prospective student in their funnel, their speed to response, how they follow up with them, how they make them feel during the process, they spend no money and no concentration on that. Whereas I have always looked at the situation that, yes, you definitely have to have a top of the funnel, because as you go through the process, it's only natural. It's one industry that you can get 100 applications and you hope that 50 start, right? And so I've always focused on, hey, if I can get the right students at the top, and I master once they apply throughout the entire, not only in enrollment management, but the organization, then now we've got something. And so that's what's been really exciting over the past 5.5 years, to really see this transform.
In terms of your application, I know when we were together, you'd mentioned that if a student has yet to interview, it's almost not even an application. You consider it almost like an inquiry.
That's correct. Yeah, and I've trained my team to say that, listen, because as enrollment managers or leaders, we know that until they step foot on campus for new student orientation, that student can change their mind, right? And so I've always said, listen, you're either going to build a relationship and find it out front, or you're going to find it on the back end. And why wouldn't you want to spend the time and energy up front to make sure that this particular student, and I don't mean cherry pick, but that the student that's going to be a good fit for them? Because it kind of goes back to that, original search that you're talking about, is that, every school is buying the same names. But just imagine if we could refine that process so that we're buying names of that particular student because of the information that we found out and why they would be most successful on our campus. And so that's what really started the process. So yeah, until they do what I call personalized interview, either virtual or on site, then they're just an inquiry until I know that not only are they going to be a good fit for us, but we're going to be a good fit for them. And that's my responsibility as an enrollment manager, is to make sure that that student is going to be successful. And so that's very important. So it started from, we went from, it was at the average 3 months to get back in touch with a prospective inquiry. And I brought that down to 60 seconds so that when an inquiry comes into our CRM system, we're immediately contacting them, and really just understand sort of that call outline, if you will, that, it's 15 or 20 minutes. You're trying to get a feel, what's your interest? What have you thought about? We ask them a lot of consultative questions, try to avoid those yes and no to really find out the motivations, not the who and the what, but the how, right? And
Absolutely.
once that happens, then we make a suggestion. Hey, you might be a better fit at our main campus, or you might want to think about X, Y, and Z. But for the most part, because of the way that we get the inquiries to begin with, we have a good chance with a lot of these students. And so once they apply, we start our process, we start reaching out to them. And then on top of that, set up a time to meet with them. We spend about an hour and a half with every single one of our students. Yeah. And again, we have a full presentation that we go through. Part of that presentation is, whether it's virtually or on site, they take a tour of our campus. I redesigned how our faculty involvement at the very beginning is, because at first they were spending a lot of time when their focus needs to be on teaching, but they are the expert in their particular fields. So there is an important place during this process for them to engage with the student in a more meaningful, impactful way, right? And so we just redesigned the entire process to now, because you can't just have an authentic consultative approach where the student is at the center of everything that you're doing, unless it goes all the way through graduation and then beyond, right? And so over the course of the years, pockets were doing that, right? But we were able to show with our numbers, if you will, that this does work. And if we had everyone on board, just think of the impact that we can make. An old mentor of mine used to say, Christopher, why help one when you can help many? And that's always stuck with me. And so, again, I want to help as many people as I possibly can, whether you agree, and I do agree that there's some folks don't need a 4-year degree. Some folks may just need a 2-year or certificate or so forth, and I'm fully behind that. But we do know over the course of time that the more education someone has, the better chance they have to get out of, whatever their socioeconomic level is at that particular time. And
Sure.
so, as kind of it's my mission, if you will, to make sure that, we contact as many people to match up. And it was very interesting, because when I started this process, and one of the admissions reps, I'll never forget, said, hey, wait a minute, are you really turning them away? I said, I'm not turning them away. They're not interested in one of our programs.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I try to force someone to come here when all they're going to do is leave? And then retention is an aspect, which was part of the reason why I went back and I got my PhD into education. And results are always, as a leader, I'll be honest with you, I sit into a webinar presentation and I'm like, okay, but what are your numbers? Is this just a one-off idea or whatever the situation is?
Sure.
What I can say is, when I started 5.5 years ago, our yield rate was about 18%. Okay. So total number of applications, only 18% of those would actually start, right? Now it's close to, it averages between 48 and 52%. So where a lot of other institutions are concentrating on that top of the funnel, I'll just spend all this money, get all of this for a hope, a wing, and a prayer, where I have really, for the past 5.5 years, have really focused on what happens when that student makes contact with us. And that's where I've spent my energy, and our team are admissions professionals. It's not a job, it's a career. They're not standing in lunchrooms waving pencils. They are sitting down and having serious conversations with all of our prospective students to find out how we can best assist them. And that's a whole different ballgame, a whole different philosophy, but something that just, as you can tell, I get very excited about it and love to share, because I think the more that we help each other in this environment, the better off each of our institutions will be.
Absolutely. I was frustrated, I think, at one of my institutions when you're admitting a student and it's based off of a single GPA, and you're going through and I'm looking at their grades, as you do, and they want to be a doctor, and all their science classes are C's and D's.
Right.
Uh, it's red flag. It's a little bit of a red flag here, right? That's not to say that they're not a great student. That's not to say that they wouldn't be successful at my institution, but I can almost guarantee they're not going to be successful in my science classes, right? Like, so
Right.
it's a bigger conversation. And yet, when you are working with that top of funnel and, this mentality sometimes that you fight for every student. And so just get the student in, get them to campus and hope for the best and find that they find their place on your campus. So I love this approach, and it's wildly different in comparison to what I've seen out there.
Well,
But numbers speak themselves.
that's exactly right. And so let me give you some numbers. So on average, if you look across institutions, it takes about $2,400 to get a student to application. Not after, but to just get them to an application. And that's just the average. It depends upon the size of your institution, whatever. When a student starts school and leaves, and this was from the Department of Education, the average loss to an institution is over $43,000. Okay, so you do the math, and the other number to that is you've got 32 million now students that have some sort of college but haven't completed their degree. Something that I've really focused on is you have to go where the students are. Now you got me riled up, Josh. What other institution can you go to, or what other business? If you went to a business and you were a customer and you spent $50,000, what type of service would you get? Right? And so, so there's this notion. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not holding their hand through the process. Oh, yes, you are. Now, don't get me wrong. We teach them to fish, but you're helping them along the way.
Yep.
Right? I mean, you get less for buying an iPhone. You get more customer service with an iPhone than the amount of money that, the investment. And we know it's expensive. And there's some control that we can, but there's a lot of control we can't. And that's where I tell my team, and what our campus has done a really good job of is, listen, we know that there are a lot of choices out there. We know that. And I am grateful. Do I think we do it better? Absolutely. But I am grateful that you have chosen us, and we will be here to support you throughout the entire process. Of course, you've got to meet us halfway, but there's so many more challenges that are different when I first started in the business to what it was before. And oftentimes, depending upon whatever your generation is, you try to impose. It's only natural. We all do it. And we have to constantly remind ourselves not to, that I'm a Gen X. Gen Z that's coming and Gen Y after that, they're not going to approach the same situation, So when I say you have to keep the student at the center of everything that you do, one of the things I have to stop and say, is this in the best interest of the student? Who is this helping? Is it helping me? Who is it helping? And if it's not helping the student, we don't do it.
And that was something that I really hoped that COVID would bring us, right? Like, we were all forced to go home. We've all lived it. We don't need to bring it up again. We were all present for it. But it made us rethink what we were doing, how we were doing, and it gave us an opportunity to reset and say, is what we're doing, is how we're doing it, what's best for our students.
Well, and let me piggyback there, because I can give you a prime example. Now, I didn't play COVID. I'll be honest. When I first started, everybody had PCs, right? Nobody had laptops. There wasn't a personalized interview that was created. There wasn't a virtual presentation. And so, again, and my personality and the things that I have learned from the past is you got to prepare for whatever. And so one of the first things that I did, and I got the question, like, can we afford to do this? You can't afford not to. So, so the first thing was getting all of our admissions reps laptops so that if we had a snow day or God forbid a tornado came, we could still service, students, right? So when COVID happened, it was such a detriment to a lot of institutions, but more importantly, detriment to a lot of students. Whereas for us, we didn't skip a beat. We took our little laptops home, set up our little office. We had our personalized interview already created. I mean, everything was already done, right? Yeah. So, and think about what would have been lost. And for that year, and again, I am grateful. We had double-digit growth that year. When a lot of people, and I felt bad too, because, if people go, well, how's it going for you? I'm like, well, we're doing okay. And, because there were so many people that weren't. But then I thought, no, I need to give credit to our team.
Yep, absolutely. So I can't, we've got to talk about an event that you have that I just am wildly jealous because how successful it is. And we tried it on a campus, it was one of my brainchildren, and I want to do something similar, and we failed miserably at it. And I was heartbroken because I thought it was such a great idea. And here you come along, and you have got this amazing event that I'm so jealous about, and it's so great. So let's talk about your scholarship event. Just give me an overview of kind of what's going on.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm always looking for different ways to make an impact for our students, to show them that we care. At the end of the day, most institutions, as far as the knowledge that students earn, give or take, everybody does a good job, right? It is what it is for the most part, right? But how can I be different? How can I show them that, again, it goes back to you've got a number of choices. And, and I don't take it for granted. And now students today, they're applying to 20 schools, whereas before it used to be 3. Yeah. And so how are we going to separate ourselves? So I tell you all of that to say that's where some of these different ideas come from. Especially, like with our singing admitted letter that plays the fight song and, different things to that. I'm always thinking of something, not a bunch of stuff, but really impactful things that we can make special. So I thought, why can't we show up at first? We can't hit everybody, but why don't we pick different areas and show up to prospective students' houses with big checks and balloons, and all of us are dressed in K-State gear, and that we're playing the fight song, and we're putting yard signs in their front yard, and we're rolling up, and try doing that at 50 houses in a day, right? With that same energy level. But I love it. And so, but it transformed for them because, again, I'm constantly pushing us to now, if it's not broke, don't fix it, but sort of reimagine. And so that's the first kind of section of that, right? From there, we then said, well, shoot, it was such a big success, but we can't get to everybody, right? Can't travel all over the United States and show up at people's houses and all that kind of stuff. So we came up with a scholarship box that had a little mini check in it, and it had a pop-up card where they scan the QR code, which then shows a video. We recorded a video as if I'm coming to your house, and we had someone open the door, and we're all standing there, so that you can at least get that experience or feel it a little bit. So in 5 years, we have traveled over 2,500 miles. We have hit almost 100 homes. We have sent probably 1,800 scholarship boxes out to 42 states, and we've awarded $13.5 million in scholarships for prospective students. And now what's great is you've got students, we're starting to do videos of students that we actually showed up at their house, and we're seeing them graduate now. And we're like, oh my gosh, and to see them when they first stepped out on the porch to when they're walking across the stage, it's pretty remarkable. But, you got to have, and to me, that's what separates us. So when you say, we've had double-digit growth for the past 5 years, and we have, it's because of those things right there. You can't fake it. And you can't just do it on the front end. You have to do it through the process. And the relationships that we create with our students, and the team does the work, right? Not to be cheesy, but I'm just the wind in their sails, really. I give them the environment to allow them to be creative. I always tell them, listen, you can make as many mistakes as you want to. But if you make the same mistake twice or three times, then that's a different conversation, right? Because they've got to empower themselves to make decisions and build these relationships. And it just, as you can see, I get excited about it. I lose my words, but I get excited about it every day. But yeah, the scholarship patrol has turned in, and one step further, we now do a scholarship luncheon where we invite all of our scholarship recipients and up to 2 guests, and they come to campus. Not everybody can show up, just but we do have a lot that travel from out of state and some international students that actually come early for it. But we just have a huge sit-down luncheon for them, equipped with, music, fanfare, big checks. Willie, our mascot, is there. I get to do my MC voice about, from the great state of Kansas, just to have fun with it. I know some of these people are new. This guy's nuts. But that's okay. My dad used to always say, keep them guessing, Christopher, keep them guessing. That's exactly what I'm doing. So, but I love it.
That's awesome. No, I think it's such an important piece to remember to find joy in what we do, right? There is, that was something that I really tried to instill in my last campus, was that, we were around each other for probably more time than we're around our own families, right? And that's something that, when we were on campus and we were with you and your team, I really applaud the connection that you have with your team. But something that you said that also resonates so well is you give them the ability to make their own path, to make their decisions, and that you are like the wind in their sails. But I think that is such a testament of not a good boss, but a good leader. Is that somebody who, I always said that my job as a leader wasn't to do your job for you. It was to alleviate the obstacles that are in your path from preventing you to do your job. Like, that was all. I was like, that's all that I want to do. I want you to be able to do your job to the best of your abilities, and then give you the opportunity for guidance or, that vision of moving forward. But I want to make your life easier, not more difficult. And I think that, really seeing you interact with your team, that is very, very evident. And I think that just that environment that you've created in the admissions team, in your office, really across campus, is so infectious that you just want to be a part of it, right?
And I appreciate that. And I think for me, and every person's different. There is, a lot of people say there's a sense of urgency about you, Dr. Smith. And I think this comes from 2 things. One, unfortunately, I lost my dad when I was 25 and my dad was 49, in a car accident. It was on Easter. I was behind him, had to do CPR. I tell that story, because again, every person has a story. There's a reason why each person acts a certain way, right? And so for me, it is about nothing being left unsaid, being completely transparent, which has its own challenges, because you often have to defend what you're doing. I'm going to be judged on not how many promotions I get, right? I'm going to be judged at the end of the day on how many people have I helped with their career. And that's what is the most important thing to me. We don't know how much time we have on this earth, and it kind of ties into, and I'm not trying to get serious or anything, but it ties into my old mentor saying, Christopher, why help one when you could help many?
Yeah.
Right. But that's what it's about. I am here to support them. We're now doing, full freshman through senior recruitment. All of our admissions representatives start talking to students their freshman year. Of course, it's a different message and how we deal, and there's a science behind that.
Well, of course, I'm pretty sure I know that, like, your response, but the graduation cliff is on, everybody.
But it's
everybody's talking about it. Everybody's terrified of it. What is your take on it? How do you feel about KSU? just going into this, are you concerned at all? What are your thoughts?
Well, I would be lying to say if I wasn't concerned, right? We've been talking about this, but one thing that I've always dealt with, is okay. There's nothing can do to change that situation, right? Parents are not having more kids. Listen, I can't control that, so I can sit here until 2025 doing the same thing that I'm already doing, even though I've had tremendous success, right? I could rest on that, or I can say, okay, what am I going to do if that is as dramatic as everybody thinks? I kind of compare it to Y2K. Everybody thought the world was ending when the clock strike, or because we'd never go to the year 2000. So I'm not ignoring it, right? It's a reality. You look at the numbers, and that traditional high school student, for the most part right now, is going to be dramatically decreased. Some states are worse than others. Ours is not as bad as some states, but I'm not resting on that. So I shared with you at the beginning of this, for the past 5.5 years, I have really focused and I have nailed down the yield. I've got that down pat. I'm not going to sacrifice it. I'm not going to spend less money on it. I know what we're doing there. But it goes back to what we were originally talking about, and this leads into what I'm really concentrating on after this recruitment cycle. So for 2024, if you will, is making sure that we are identifying the students that have the best chance to be successful for us. So, and again, that's not just on the recruitment side. So as part of the executive leadership team, we're talking about, okay, that lifelong learner. Do we have enough certificates? Do we have enough associate's degrees, our bachelor's degrees, our master's, PhDs? So there's some things that we don't control. A lot of times we're the mouthpiece, right? We're the mouthpiece as to what's happening on campus. Everybody thinks enrollment management is going to save the day. We are not the silver bullet. We have to make sure that there is something for us to talk about, or something for us to sell, if you will, to use that word. And so on that side, we are focusing, we are deeply involved on the marketing side to make sure that the programs that are being created over the next couple of years are those that are going to be industry focused. We are pairing with local industries in the area. We've got one, for example, that students can come in, any of our engineering degrees. They can interview for this spot. They will get over 2,000 contact hours. They go year round. They complete their degree within 3 years. They earn $20 an hour while they're in school. They would work 28 hours a week at the actual manufacturing place. And then they come out, and we're funneling employees to this particular company, but we're partnering and we're reducing debt for students. So it's those types of creative things. But for me personally, what I can control is how we purchase those names. Mm-hmm. And so it is, utilizing, your services, utilizing, other third party, which I don't have a lot. There's only 3 or 4 main folks that I deal with, but really helping to understand that if I'm going to spend $100,000, I'm just throwing out a number up top, I want to make sure that I have the best chance for those students. Yep. I don't want to be purchasing the same names that every single institution is purchasing.
Yep.
And which I could give them gold bars and fly them in on one of our airplanes, and they would still never even come. So think about the resources that are wasted there. So there are several things. I won't go into this will be a follow-up maybe, but because I want to show results first. But that's what we're doing. And we're looking at transferability. We're looking at stackability of our degree programs, and really identifying those pockets across the United States of those students that need to hear our message. And I have the best chance to see them be successful. And so, yes, I'm always concerned, but at the same time, I'm like, well, if it's Y2K and we're all in the woods in the cabin, then, at least we'll have some food. But, but I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to be prepared. Now, it may not work, but at least I'm doing something, and I'm not waiting for the inevitable to see if it's true or not true. So when people say that, I'm like, okay, great. Well, what are you going to do about it?
in higher education, a lot of times we are sitting around a table, we're talking about it, we're concerned. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, we could do this, we could do that. And then before you know it, we're in the thick of it and it's too late. It is too late.
Too late. Well, and I always joke, I always say you have a meeting upon another meeting to have another meeting to discuss that previous meeting, and 6 months goes by and you're nowhere closer to that.
Yep.
You know, but it goes back to something you said earlier when you started seeing the buzzwords of student centric. So I don't want to, be a Debbie Downer or pop anybody's bubble, but you're behind now.
Mm-hmm.
So, if there's anything that you take away from this or any other, podcast you're listening to or resource, just implement something. When I do talks around the country, it's like, I didn't do all of this overnight. This is 5.5 years of hard work. And each year we added something that was relevant to that particular. So just find one thing. What is it? Your admitted letter that needs to make you stand out? Is it your digital advertising that needs you to stand out? All of those different things. Pick one at a time, show great results, and then 9 times out of 10, the folks that are influencing your budget can't argue with that. Now, sometimes they always don't give you what you want, but still, when you've got numbers to show it, it's hard to deny the reality versus the smoke and mirrors of the cliff that's coming.
Sure. Well, Dr. Smith, thank you so much for this time. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. This is my first podcast ever.
You're a natural. I expect you to have your own here very shortly.
Thank you so much. Like I said, I really appreciate the opportunity. This just allows me to get to share a little bit of my story and the success of our team and the success of our university. And I'll tell anybody who's listening, I tell this when I go and talk, if you want to bounce some ideas off, I get accused all the time of being radically transparent, because they're like, Dr. Smith, are you afraid somebody's going to steal your ideas? I'm like, no, because it's in the implementation.
Yeah.
And so, but I'll help you with that too, if you want me to help you with it. It's the underlining principle that if we put the students in the best place for them to be successful, there will be enough students to go around to everybody.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that that's one thing I love about higher education is that at the end of the day, we are here for the success of students. And whether that cliff comes or whether it doesn't, there will still be students to educate, to make this world a better place. And there's enough of us to be able to survive. But you got to be able to do something, and it has to be centered around the success of your students. If that truly is at the core of who you are as an institution, of who you are as a professional in enrollment management, we are going to be perfectly fine. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And just thank you for the work that you do in changing students' lives. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what's impactful. So thank you.
Thank you.